Alright, finally getting back to another episode of Long Run Time. I think it's been about 6 years since I did my last one. I think it was about 2014 when I last took a look at Satan Tango. Well, finally getting around to another one, as without meaning to date the video, everyone seems to be inside at the moment, and so am I, so I thought why not use this time to do another episode of Long Run Time. And this one's been sitting on the shelf for about a year, Sorrow and the Pity. Now, I don't know much about this. I've tried to not look too deep into it, as I'm wanting to go in relatively blind. I do know that it is a 4.5 hour long documentary about, I think it's about the Nazi occupation of France during World War II. So, pretty heavy subject matter. I'm going to be watching the Arrow Academy Blu-ray, which I think in the UK anyway, it's probably the easiest way to get a hold of it, the one that you're more likely going to see out and about. It's split up into 2 parts as far as I'm aware, so I'll watch the first part. I'll probably do a little bit of have a bit of a chat afterwards, just sort of say what it's about and what I thought of it, and then I'll go into the second part and do much the same at the end, maybe giving it maybe a score at the end. Recently I've been, whenever I watch a film, put it down on a list that I've made just so I can remember what I've watched and just give it a little score, so I'll probably tell you what I end up giving it. I think I heard of this film, as a lot of people I'm sure have, through Annie Hall, as it is one of the plot points in Annie Hall, and yeah, I'm just fascinated to see what it's about, so I'm gonna shut the curtains, dim the lights, and start watching it. So I'll see you in probably about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Alright then, so just finished part 1. I was right, it is split up into 2 parts. Part 1 is called The Collapse, which I just watched, and part 2 is The Choice, which I'm going to watch next. So, I was right as well about the subject matter. It's a documentary about the Nazis' occupation of France during the 40s. So it starts with sort of how that came about, sort of the fall of the French army, and then like split up into 2 different sides, a lot like the resistance and the bourgeois, who kind of go more right wing and side with the Nazis, and then sorry, have a quick drink. It's been 2 hours. And then it sort of talks about just various things that happened while the Nazis were invading. A lot of candid interviews with people who were on either side during that time, which is quite interesting. Okay, let me think, because it's kind of all over the place. It's not really structured chronologically, I guess. There's a little bit of chronology towards the beginning when it starts. So it sort of starts with the like the Nazis moving in and why that happened. The French kind of falling out with the English, the French kind of giving up, and then it moves into sort of how that affected the rich people who kind of profited off of it, and how it affected the poor people pretty badly, as you'd imagine. And then it moves into like some of the more anti-Semitic stuff later on, in that half. Into quite a few court cases where a lot of Jewish people were getting put on trial. Quite an interesting section as well about... Sorry, my throat. I have been sat here for 2 hours without drinking water. I should probably be drinking more water. But I haven't. So, what was I saying? About the cinemas, how they started showing more German films, more French films that were more propaganda, and a lot of people didn't like it, and again there's more of a resistance building up now. It's quite engaging, quite interesting. I feel like it requires a little bit of background knowledge on the subject, unfortunately. There were a few bits where I was slightly lost, not necessarily lost, but just sort of felt like I was missing a part of what they were talking about, maybe due to me not being completely up to date with my World War II knowledge, I don't know, but some interesting footage. Some interviews are really interesting, and there's a lot of sort of footage from during like the 40s court cases, footage of like France during the 40s, like armies and Hitler and stuff like that, which is quite interesting to see. There's some really funny parts with some like of the time adverts. There was one for raising rabbits and then killing them and feeding your family because the family likes all aspects of the rabbits, which is quite funny. And there was one for paint on ties for women who couldn't afford ties because everything was getting a bit frugal at the time, so you'd paint your legs to look like you were wearing ties, which I thought was quite funny. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm interested in seeing the second part, which I'll be watching shortly. I'm gonna have a little break. I need to sort the camera out. I need to have a piss, and I'm getting a bit hungry as well. So I'll be back very shortly, and we'll get cracking on part 2, The Choice. Alright then, I'm back, I'm fed, I'm watered, I've got a coffee on the go, so I'm going to start watching part 2, The Choice. I think that they're both split up into equal sized parts, I think about 2 hours and 10 minutes, so I'll see you in 2 hours and 10 minutes. Right, so I've just finished part 2, just finished The Sorrow and the Pity. Okay, let me just collect my thoughts a second, that was quite a lot. So the second part just kind of carries on straight away with just sort of discussing some of the bad things that were happening while the Germans were occupying France. The interesting part about a bunch of Nazis getting hand grenades thrown at them in a cinema by some French rebellion people, which I don't know, kind of reminded me of Inglourious Bastards. I don't know, maybe Tarantino took a bit of influence from that story. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the resistance in this part. Yeah, just sort of talking about how a lot of people were fleeing the country, taking up residence in London, forming like a little resistance there. Then it gets a bit sort of hard hitting with some of the death camp chat, sort of some of the stuff that went down there. There's a big part about the then French Prime Minister, people on his side, people against him, goes into the sort of politics of that, and then sort of the downfall of the resistance and people getting wrongly accused, put on trial. yeah, it was a really interesting documentary, honestly. Very thorough. Interesting variety of people that it sort of interviewed. You got like some of the Jewish people getting interviewed, a gay person who was sort of living in France at the time, and then you get some of the Nazi sympathisers and just some general members of the public, and the resistance members were quite interesting as well. A lot of them very sort of rural farmer types. Yeah, there was a couple interesting bits in there as well, sort of regarding the politics of the time. I think this was made around the 60s, and they're talking to one of the old resistance members, and he says like, "Oh, government's run by 80-year-olds and it shouldn't be. Probably should be run by some of the younger generation." I was like, oh, that's interesting because you hear that a lot nowadays. Yeah, and it's just funny that you're hearing the similar sort of thing from such a long time ago that kind of reoccurs nowadays. But then there's also the idea of, obviously, with the isolation at the moment and the COVID-19 stuff, you see now it's sort of changing how people have to act and how people cope. You know, food not necessarily being as easy as it was. I'm not saying that like World War II conditions are as bad as this, because that's definitely not the case, but it's more just how things get turned on the head a little bit and people have to start acting differently, and how people cope, and what sort of changes in a society that, you know, that causes the biggest concern for groups of people. And it's just funny because we're in a version of that at the moment, a little one, but then there's some light-hearted moments as well, some funny parts, some songs in there, like by some of the old sort of performers. Yeah, really good overall. I'd say that I'd recommend it if you're interested in the French occupation, if you're interested in that side, or maybe World War II or history or something like that. Probably worth a look. Pretty thorough, pretty interesting. Personally, I'm not overly interested in it as a topic. Saying that though, I did enjoy my time watching it. So if I was to give it a rating, I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5. It doesn't do anything wrong at all. It's quite a well-made, well-shot, well-edited documentary. So there's not really many downsides, maybe apart from the subject matter, which is just something that is a personal interest. I'm not personally interested in. So yeah, I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5. So yeah, I probably wouldn't mind doing a few more of these reviews in the future. I've got a few ideas, so maybe I'll do a few more. I know I said on the first episode when I covered Satan Tango, I said that I'd look at Showa. I've still not managed to get a copy of it, so maybe at some point I will do Showa. I know it's a 12-hour long documentary again, but on the Holocaust, so I imagine that's a lot more miserable, a lot more downbeat than this, which was already pretty somber in tone. So I'll probably leave it at that. There was a weird part that I did want to mention actually. There's one of the ex-Nazis. The film starts with a shot of a wedding, and the ex-Nazi's just been interviewed throughout what looks like his daughter's wedding, and he's just sort of answering questions about why he was a Nazi during the time, while his daughter miserably looks on, dressed in a bridal gown. It's really strange. Is there anything else? I think that's probably it really. I'll probably just leave it there. Sorry if I didn't go too in depth. I'm not a history buff or anything like that, so if I got anything wrong, then just let me know. And if I didn't go too in depth, if you wanted something a bit more in depth, then again I apologise. I'm just giving you my opinion on the thing as I watched it. So yeah, cheers for having a look.